채널 젊은 달. 제가 최근에 드니 빌너브와 크리스토퍼 놀란 감독님이 스토리보드에 대해 얘기하는 쇼츠를 올렸었는데요.
Are you a good drawer? Are you?
No, not particularly. And I don't actually storyboard that much. I've done certain sequences. I mean, it's fascinating to hear that you creatively you started with storyboarding before you ever got a camera.
Once the screenplay is done, I will storyboard most of the movie, if not the entire movie, and it's a new way to rewrite and to approach, bring the words closer to the camera. And I then, once the storyboard I finish, I rewrite the screenplay again from the storyboards, because there's a lot of changes that will be found through the storyboards. The cinematic alphabet of the film, the rhythm, everything is in the boards.
And is that before you have the whole team on? Or?
Absolutely.
Right.
I do it by myself, and it's a way to dream about the movie in the most intimate way. It's one of my favorite moments of the film process. Yeah. Now there's a rule on my set is that most of the time I throw the storyboard out and we improvise with the camera, but it secures me to find the movie.
딱히 업계 관계자가 아니신 분들도 봉준호 감독님의 기생충 스토리보드로 접하신 분들이 많이 있으리라 생각됩니다.
스토리보드 그리는 것 자체 불안해서 그리는 것 같아요. 스토리보드 없이도 영화 잘 찍는 감독님들 엄청 많잖아. 근데 저는 모든 샷을 제가 다 그리거든요. 그걸 하나하나 그릴 때마다 약간씩 불안이 가라앉기 때문에 불안하면 꺼내갖고 다시 이렇게 보고 있는 거죠. 이대로 될 것이다.
이러한 특성 때문에 스토리보드에 관련된 사전 작업은 거장들의 수만큼 다양한 견해가 있는데요.
For example, I do not use a storyboard. I think it's an instrument of the cowards.
오늘 영상을 통해 과연 스토리보드는 영화 제작에서 어떠한 기능을 하고 있으며 대가들은 이를 어떻게 사용하고 어떻게 안 사용하는지를 알아보며 스토리보드라는 작업을 자세히 살펴보는 시간을 준비해 봤습니다. 오늘 살펴볼 감독님들입니다. 마틴 스콜세지, 코엔 형제, 리들리 스콧, 프란시스 포드 코폴라, 아리 에스터, 그리고 요르고스 란티모스 감독님 되겠습니다.
The process of visualizing a scene alone in a room, a small room, drawing little pictures. In some cases the picture is very elaborate, in other cases they're little stick figures maybe. It's just an eye and an arrow. That is like the most essential process of making a film, even if I don't ultimately utilize all those shots, because it's a process that I've interpreted the picture. Part of that is security. So when you go on a set, fairly secure, I feel that I can tell people what I want. Then it's a matter of letting go of that security, which means that I think I know what I want, but I'd like to see what else I could get. There's sometimes you come up with ways of visualizing something that just is joyful, and it's really wonderful feeling.
Just when you go to, he'll show you when you go to pull the thing, maybe just raise your arms a little slower. Okay. Because right now it's like.
Exactly. We're gonna practice right now. Good.
A lot of this film has to do with who's in the frame and who's not in the frame. But I spent about 4 days in my den in New York, alone, no telephone, just playing around with the whole script. I have stopped drawing big storyboards. Only for this film I did the first sequences. For the rest of the film, I did little notes in the script, annotations and some little drawings. But what happens is that I try to visualize the film scene by scene, enough to give me room to explore when I'm there on the set or in the location, so that it isn't written in stone. That's ready before it slips into frame. I know what to do. So you sort of get to a black depression before staging each scene. On any movie. It's like an actor's fear of rehearsal. It's the same thing. Once you be able to realize it, you see it come to life, and you feel a little better, you know?
Storyboards were so elaborate. There was one that was a floor plan that showed where the camera and the actors were for each single shot. Another corner was like a normal storyboard, and on the bottom were an area for comments like car lighting effect or rain.
Exactly. You don't want to get the set at the beginning of the day and start to think about how you're going to cover the scene. You want to have thought about it before.
There are plenty of people who do. I mean, and they do it really well. I mean, there are directors who are completely comfortable extemporizing on the set. We're kind of the other end of the spectrum, where we're more comfortable if we have a plan, even if we stray quite a distance from that plan while we're shooting, given circumstances. But the other aspect of it really does have to do with money and habits that you get into early on. It's if you have very little money and the person who's doing the set says, do I have to build all 4 walls? If you know from the shots that you've designed that you're only going to see this wall and that wall, then you don't have to build the other 2 walls, and it's half as much money.
You know, it's interesting, Barton Fink and then Hadsucker as well, it's very much about camera moves, about style. And then when we did Fargo, Joel and Ethan said, you know, we really want this to feel like a documentary. And I said, well, documentary, you know, you don't have tracking shots. You basically shoot on a 40mm lens and you stay back a bit, and usually you shoot over the shoulders instead of singles. Because and so gradually we started doing that. We used longer lenses and stuff, which was a big departure really from what they had been doing previously. They got a very clear idea of the kind of look and feel they want to the film, and everything's storyboarded. I mean, they storyboard, and then I sit down with them before we shoot, and we go through all the storyboards, and we all contribute to it. And then before we shoot, there's a final big book of storyboards, which is the whole movie in pictures.
And they say the camera movement went to zip. I mean,
yeah, except for I remember on the first day we'd said, right, no dolly tracks, no camera moves. First day, I think we did a 60-foot tracking shot. But it wasn't like, you know, on Barton Fink or Hadsucker, it wasn't like whoosh into our eye or something. It was much more sort of, you hardly know it's happening. It's just more naturalistic effect, you know. But I think it didn't matter that we were breaking our rule. It's the very fact that we thought about the film in those terms that kept us, you know, the film did have a unity. It did have a naturalistic look, and it was because we had, you know, thought it through really. Yeah.
And the storyboard starts off in my mind as I'm actually reading the script, and I can literally get flashes on the location which will very often actually give me a reason to choose that particular location, because I start to see the scene in the room or on the location or wherever it is, and then that gets put down. I start this thumbnail. You know, thumbnails are awfully fast if you know what you're doing, and I'm a draftsman, so I can really thumbnail something down as the state of play for the day. Literally as I'm going there in the morning in a car. And it's like a refresher course on what you're about to do. I think whether you're an actor or whether you're a director, you find your own way going there that morning. And sometimes I don't leave it that late. Sometimes it's done way earlier, and in which case I just glance through the boards, and I may have some new thoughts that morning as I'm going in which case then there'll be notations to the board or thumbnails on the board to remind me that this may be better or that may be better, you know. It's like a rehearsal for me. So I think that's why very often when I hit the set, I know exactly what I want to do.
You always say that when you make movies that nice to have the script all tied up and locked off and ready to go before you step anywhere near, even on the first day. And that so rarely happens. In this instance, this was certainly not locked up the day before I got on the set. But I think what happens when that occurs is you really, really pay attention to everything that you're doing and every step you're taking. And the organic effect of a decision now, what will that mean later? And I think what came out of it was what seemed to be a seamless movie.
I think it's important to put your impressions down on the first reading, because those are the initial instincts about what you thought was good or what you didn't understand or what you thought was bad. And so I took the book and I actually wrote my comments right on the book itself. And having gotten through the book with these few notes and comments, I then made a prompt book out of it. A prompt book is sort of an old tradition from theater. And basically, you take a sheet of loose leaf paper, and I sat there myself and I cut out this hole in the middle of the page, and then I pulled my book apart that I had made those comments on, and I myself pasted every page of the novel onto sheets of paper like this, and then I put really good grommets, those reinforcers on the holes so that that wouldn't tear. I think I put them on both sides, and I called it the Godfather Notebook and put a big warning, if found, return to this address for reward, because I recognized that it would have every opinion that I had on the book, I decided to break down each section with these key criteria. This is a very big one because it was the wedding scene. One was synopsis, to synopsize that particular part of the book. A paragraph or two saying what up to there really had happened in terms of the story. Number two was the times, which is to say, how did what happened in the story at that point, how do the times bear on it? In this case, it was the 40s, so after World War II, America had a certain style.
What is it? Hey, my sister's wedding.
Every scene I was relating it to the period. So when I then was told by Paramount that the movie was going to not be shot period, it was going to be contemporary shot, which is to say the 70s, in fact that we were going to shoot it in Kansas City, I really had a very hard time accepting that and made a big point that it had to be period because obviously that was going to make the movie more expensive, which is not what they wanted at all. And it must have been because I had just gone through this vast, big, thick book writing notes as to why it had to be, what the 40s had to do with the story. Imagery and tone, this is of course images that seem to stand out from reading it or even the tone of the story. Number 4, it says the core, and this is something I think I borrowed from Elia Kazan in his notes from the way he broke down the play Streetcar Named Desire. It's published in a book on directing. But for 5, I put pitfalls, which was to say, how can I screw this up? What are dangers, things that you want to avoid or dangers that you very easily could find yourself in? Cliches, Italians who would talk like this, failure to make a convincing setting, boring. People must feel that they're seeing the real thing with hundreds and hundreds of interesting specifics, like the children sliding around the sandwich man, throwing the sandwich. Hey Bino, 2 gabagool and 1 prosciutto. Losing a basic humanity to all these people, failing to set up a tension between Godfather and Michael, too much exposition.
I remember when I was working with Francis, we were doing this funeral scene, and the shooting day was over. We lost the light. And in those days, the studio, those producers were right there, and they said, it's over. Yeah. And I felt rather good about it being over because I was tired, a long day. I saw Francis sitting there over the gravestones. Mm-hmm. He was crying, literally sobbing. Mm. And I went over and I said, what's the matter? He said, they won't give me another setup. He was crying about it. And I thought, this is how much it meant to him. Yeah. That extra setup, and for people who don't know, it can make the difference in a scene.
My first 2 features, I shot listed everything before I went to the crew, just so I have the fullest movie in my own head, so I know how to talk about it. And what I found was I really stuck to that. It was pretty stringent. I mean, I can't rewatch my films, but if I ever did stumble into one of my films and found myself rewatching something, they started to feel really like just rote, kind of there's something dead about them, where it's like, yeah, I just executed the plan here. And I was sort of dictating blocking and not making myself open to new ideas. I think just because I was nervous, right? I just wanted to make sure I had a plan and I stuck to it. And then on Beau, I knew I wouldn't be able to do that with Joaquin, and that was enticing to me, the idea of kind of throwing things away a little bit. And I still came in with a shot list, and I knew how I would shoot everything, but I tried to never impose blocking on him and kind of, and then and see what he would do without that being dictated. And I found that a lot of the time he would end up doing what I anticipated he might do, but then sometimes he would do something really surprising. And I guess the experiment was, can I adjust on a dime on the day? And I found not only that I was able to, but that I liked that way of working, and I prefer those scenes to the ones that I just mapped out and I stuck to the plan.
It's not cohesive from the beginning. I mean, you just need to, try things out and see how they work and find the balance. For us, it's just like building a language, like a filmic language, and discussing early on like what it is that we want to do, like what lenses do we want to use, what kind of movement, or do we want to use movement, or in poor things there's a lot of zooms as well that might be a little subtle within the whole construction. So we just decide on these tools or these words or this language, and then slowly, because you don't have the luxury of trying them out a lot before you actually start filming. I think in the process of filming, you just get to know them more and more, and then you're able to make more specific decisions.
Yeah.
And then the earlier stuff, like you can mold more during the editing, so you may shoot a little bit more in the beginning just to refine that language that you're discovering, with your DP. Also, we never, like shot list or storyboard anymore. I guess maybe early on I did that, but it was always just to, again, set up this language and the intention. All of my films before Poor Things, we shot on location. So a lot of it had to do with that. So you go on location and, you rehearse with the actors and figure out how you want to shoot a certain scene. But I find that's the most efficient way for us to create, this kind of filmic language.
제가 만드는 영화들을 보고 제가 굉장히 영감에 이렇게 의지해서 계시 같은 걸 받아서 혼자서 막 결정하고 뚝심 있게 고집스럽게 밀어붙이는 그런 유형의 감독이라고 생각하실 수도 있겠습니다만은 사실은 저는 반대 유형에 속합니다. 저의 작업 과정 전체는 대화로 이루어져 있습니다. 타인과의. 하늘에 있는 뮤즈와의 대화가 아니라 내가 함께 일하는 동료들과의 대화죠. 각본 쓸 때 공동 각본, 그다음에 프리프로덕션 단계에서 촬영 감독과 스토리보드를 계속 모든 것을 다 만들고, 스토리보드를 그렇게 만드는 이유는 촬영 현장에서는 배우들과 대화를 하기 위해서예요. 그 시간을 얻기 위해서. 후반 작업에서는 당연히 편집할 때 뭐 할 때 모든 단계마다 그 전문가들과 계속 끊임없는 대화를 하죠. 저의 그 선택에 대한 의심은 끝이 없습니다. 그래서 옆에 있는 사람 누구에게도 물어봐요. 옆에 나의 그냥 어시스턴트든 누구든 가까이 있는 사람 누구에게나 계속 물어. 이게 좋아, 저게 좋아, 뭐 이게 이해가 돼? 이런 얘기들을 계속 물어보죠. 흔히 이 분야 종사자들 또 모든 예술가들이 첫 번째 아이디어가 결국은 최선의 아이디어다라는 이야기를 하곤 합니다. 또 촬영할 때도 첫 번째 테이크가 결국엔 제일 좋은 테이크더라, 이런 얘기도 흔하죠. 근데 저는 모르겠어요. 저는 그렇게 생각 안 해요. 적어도 저는 그렇지 않아요. 제가 첫 번째 하는 생각은 대개는 어디서 본 것 같은 그냥 컨벤셔널하고 클리셰로 가득 찬 생각일 때가 많더라고요. 그것에서 그렇지 않은가, 이것이 클리셰인가 아닌가를 늘 의심해야 됩니다. 저는 그래요. 그걸 극복하는 방법은 항상 누군가에게 물어보는 거죠.
안녕하세요, 젊은달입니다. 현재 시네마클럽은 3기 수강신청을 절찬리에 받고 있습니다. 강연에 관련된 더 자세한 내용은 커뮤니티 게시물을 참고해 주시고요. 오늘은 저에 대해서 간략하고 빠르게 소개해드리려고 합니다. 저는 영화를 하는 사람입니다. 연출 지망생이라고들 하죠. 입봉할 때까지는 떳떳하게 감독이라고 말할 수 없는 것 같습니다. 저는 반지의 제왕을 보고 나서부터 영화 감독이 되고 싶었던 사람입니다. 정확히는 확장판 DVD에 수록된 방대한 부가 수록을 보고 나서부터 영화 감독이 되고 싶었던 사람입니다. 저는 대학 때 만들었던 단편의 충격으로 모든 걸 멈추고 프랑스로 넘어가 영화 전문학교에 들어갔습니다. 저는 연출 전공생이지만 나름의 논리로 편집과에 들어가 졸업을 했습니다. 졸업을 한 뒤에도 저는 계속 방황했습니다. 원했던 정답보다는 질문만 산더미같이 늘어난 느낌이었습니다. 그렇게 빈손으로 귀국했지만 금세 회복했습니다. 여러분들도 아시는 지금의 채널을 운영하면서 지금도 계속해서 현장을 나가고 개인 작업을 이어가고 있습니다. 저는 영화를 아주 많이 좋아합니다.